Hey guys, Magnus Robert here, bringing you another video on another dead Walking Dead character. This one will be on the Alexandrian Dr. Pete Anderson. Father to Ron and Sam, husband to Jesse, and enemy of Rick. Pete is of course male, he is played by Corey Brill, and is mid-30s. Before the outbreak, Pete lived somewhere likely close to Virginia, and he seemed to have somewhat of a traumatic childhood, causing him to have angry outbursts. Pete attempted art college and attended it where he met Jesse. He soon got her pregnant, and then he trained to become a surgeon to provide for his family. Soon Ron was born, and a few years later Sam was born too. At some point, Pete began physically and mentally abusing his wife and children, possibly as a result of his childhood. When the outbreak began, Pete and his family made it to safety in Alexandria, where he was assigned by Deanna most likely to be the surgeon for the community. In Season 5, Pete smokes on his porch and sees Rick, and he welcomes him to Alexandria. Pete meets Rick again at Deanna's welcoming party. He offers Rick a checkup. He waves at Rick and tries to put his arm around his wife, but she won't let him. A drunk Pete visits Rick, calling him his friend, and tells him to bring Carl and Judith for a checkup. Later, he is visited by Carol, who asks him to see Jesse, but Pete refuses, saying she can't be seen, giving Carol reasonable suspicion that he is an abuser. Pete approaches Rick later, and Rick tells him to keep walking, coldly. Rick tries to get Jesse and Pete to live separately, and he visits them, and Pete interrupts and gets angry, telling Rick that he is not the law, and the two men fight. Rick and Pete go flying through the window and fight on the streets of Alexandria. Rick gets Pete in a headlock before Deanna stops him. Pete watches angrily as Rick and Jesse talk, and then he is visited by Carol, who gives him a casserole. Carol threatens Pete with a knife and tells him if he tries to hurt anyone, especially Tara, who was in his care as she was injured, then she would kill him. Pete breaks Carol's dish and gets angry and drunk. Later that night, Pete goes into Michonne and Rick's house, taking her sword, and looks for Rick. He finds Rick at the meeting and threatens him, saying, "You're not one of us." Red steps in, trying to calm Pete down, and Pete accidentally slices Reg's throat while trying to get him to back off. Abraham pins Pete to the ground as a crying Deanna holds her dying husband. Deanna turns to Rick and says, "Do it." And this happens to Pete. Shot in the head by Rick. In Season 6, Pete is about to be buried in Alexandria when Rick protests to burying killers within the walls. Deanna agrees, and Rick and Morgan go out of the walls to bury Pete far away. Pete was a piece of shit, an abuser, and an all-round jackass, but it served a nice moral dilemma, as he was a doctor and therefore useful to the community. I liked his character overall, and I wish maybe we could have learned a little bit more about his past to understand how he became such a monster. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, tell me your thoughts on Pete, and I shall see you in the next video. Next week is of course the random thingy-majingy, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you next one. Goodbye.